The scene you're looking at is not some candlelight vigil. That's the largest convention center in the Southeast, the World Congress Center in downtown Atlanta, just a few weeks ago. And the glow is obviously the phones in everybody's hands as they await the keynote speaker. 40,000 people. This is the international meeting of Rotary Club International. And what they're waiting for is Bill Gates to talk about world health issues. And for most of the people in the audience, that was their view of Bill Gates on a large screen, half a mile away. A few minutes after he finished his keynote, this is where Bill Gates was, joining me and just a couple of my colleagues on campus at Georgia State University. This was not an invitation we extended to Bill Gates. This is one he extended to us. He asked whether he could come to campus after his keynote because he had heard a lot about our work, especially using technology and data to help low-income students. It was a very specific self-invitation. He said absolutely he did not want to meet presidents, provosts, so forth. This was not a ceremonial visit. In fact, what you're looking at in this picture is the full extent of everybody he met with for the 2.5 hours he was on campus. Myself, my colleague Allison Calhoun-Brown, and 4 students. And what he did was listen intently and try to learn about the full spectrum of challenges that especially low-income first-generation college students face in trying to succeed in college. This is a historic moment. This is Bill Gates encountering SSC campus. Yes, absolutely. Allison and one of our students, that's Gabriela, a first-generation Latina, are sitting there with campus opened, showing him. You can see the perplexed look on his face. You know he's looking at one of these screens from campus. And he really enjoyed sitting down and talking with the students, genuinely so. You can see how much he's enjoying it there. We had, in all honesty, pre-selected 4 students to meet with him. All had fascinating stories. All were first-generation students. But I'm going to talk this afternoon about one student in particular, the student who by far, given his background, had the least likelihood to be sitting in that chair talking to Bill Gates as an enrolled college student at Georgia State. And it may not be the student you would suspect as the most at risk. I'm going to talk about the redheaded young man on the right. That's Austin Burchell. Austin Burchell, a first-generation college student just finishing his freshman year at Georgia State from the northwest part of the state, one of the poorest parts of Georgia. It's really the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. His father was career military, and after leaving the military, ran a produce stand. His mother, an assistant manager in a retail outlet. And Austin had a difficult hand dealt to him fairly early on in life. When he was 13 years old, his father was diagnosed with ALS, commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And that started a multi-year period where there was a rhythm to Austin's life that we would not wish on anyone, especially somebody so young. His mother would stay and care for the father during the day. And when Austin got off classes, he knew he had to go home immediately every day, and he would do his homework and watch his father at the same time while his mother went to work and did an evening shift. And this lasted for 2 years. His father died of ALS when Austin was 15 years old. And again, it was a huge transformation in his life. He tells the story that he became now the man of the house. The oldest son was expected to take on even more responsibility. But he also tells of a life-changing moment. It was an evening, long, hard day, where his mother was sitting at the kitchen table. She had lost her job in the tail end of the father's illness because she had to dedicate so much time to tending to him. And she had all her resumes spread out over the table and was lamenting the fact that she couldn't get back into the job market. She couldn't get a job. She was first generation, and her claim to her son was, don't let this happen to you. You know, I didn't go to college, and now I can't compete for the jobs this family needs. And Austin took this to heart. The family didn't have a car. In the months after that, he took a bus down to downtown Atlanta, where Georgia State is located, toured campus, was amazed by the fact that there was this big city with now 50,000 students in the middle of this downtown environment, vowed he would go to Georgia State, became aware of the costs of college, knew his family couldn't begin to afford it, and began to apply himself seriously to his studies. The state of Georgia has some state scholarship programs. Most of you probably heard of the Hope Scholarship. There's also the so-called Zellmiller Scholarship, which is the most elite scholarship. It goes to only about 1% of high school graduates in Georgia. You have to have at least a 3.7 GPA and meet certain SAT scores and so forth. And amazingly, despite all the obstacles he faced, Austin got the Zellmiller Scholarship. He got into Georgia State University. He was thrilled and excited. And he showed every sign of being on the right path, except for a problem. And the problem was one of summer melt. It's a chronic problem at places like Georgia State that serve 70% of our students are non-white, 60% of our students are Pell eligible. And it had been growing every year. Summer melt, to be clear, is not the phenomena of students sampling different institutions and deciding late in the game to go to one school rather than another. Summer melt is something much more tragic than that. It's students who do everything right. They graduate from high school, they take the SATs, they apply to college, they get in college, they confirm they're coming to college, and they never go to college. We actually did an analysis in the summer of 2015 of all the students who had confirmed they were coming to Georgia State but never showed up. And this was the very disturbing thing that we found. We used National Student Clearinghouse to track all those students for a full year. That's what happened to them. Maybe they ended up at our colleague's institution at Kennesaw State. Maybe they went to some other campus. We found that there were 278 students who, 12 months after being confirmed to attend classes at Georgia State, all set to go, had not attended a single day of post-secondary studies. And that's the profile of the students we lost that year. 78% non-white, mostly low income, exactly the kind of students that we need to succeed with as a nation, and they're just melting away during the summer. All ready to go, classes come around, and they're not there. Look at those GPAs. I mean, these are the success stories, but something's happening. And the something is our responsibility. It's our responsibility at Georgia State. It's all of our responsibilities in this room today. Because what's tripping these students up are the bureaucracies and obstacles that we put in the way. We did an analysis that summer, and we found that there are about 14 things that a student needs to do between graduating from high school and starting the first day of classes at Georgia State in order to be ready to hit the ground running. 14 things. And you know that these things are difficult hurdles to overcome. Completing the FAFSA, which is something that no 17-year-old can do from any economic background on their own. Verification processes, which are wholly inequitable when it comes to class distinctions. If you're the son or daughter of a middle-class family who files a joint tax return, you're very unlikely to get a verification request. If you're being raised by grandma because your biological dad has not been in the picture for the last three years, bingo, you're going to be the one to get the verification request. And what 17-year-old from any economic background is going to take a formal request from the federal government in the middle of July saying, we need verification that your grandmother is your legal guardian and that your father is not contributing to the finances of your family, and be able to respond to that in a productive fashion? And what we found, not surprisingly, is there were a subset of our students who were taking that request, sticking it in their pocket, and saying, I guess I'm not going to college after all. State of Georgia has immunization requirements, makes complete sense from a public health perspective. But it's another differentiator when it comes to income. because the middle and upper income students who have had consistent health care throughout their childhood have no trouble producing immunization records. It's the low income students, the first generation students, who struggle and too often say, again, I guess I'm not going to college because I can't produce these records that are required of our institution. So for the summer of 2016, 1 year later, we did a few things differently. We worked with our colleagues here at EAB on an alpha project to come up with a portal to track our students through those 14 steps that they need to complete. The idea is, we used to know that students were on the radar screen and progressing, and then somehow they would just drop off of it. Now what we want to do is know why they're dropping off of it. They were good and they completed their financial aid forms, but now it comes time to submit the immunization records, and we're hearing nothing more from them, so that we can begin to deliver personalized information and personalized support for these students at scale. The other thing we did is we launched one of the first student success-oriented chatbots in the country. A chatbot is an AI-enhanced automatic texting platform. And what we did is build up a knowledge base of common answers to questions frequently asked by incoming freshmen. We connected it with a portal on smart devices, so students 24/7 could ask any question, and if the answer was in the knowledge base, which we build up over 2,000 answers to questions, they would immediately get a response. We did some early estimates and guessed that maybe we would have 5,000 to 6,000 questions answered for our incoming freshmen in the 3 months leading up to fall 16 classes. In those 3 months, we had over 200,000 questions answered by incoming freshmen. 200,000, average response time 7 seconds. We wanted to collect meaningful data on this experiment, this pilot, so we worked with Lindsay Page and Ben Castleman. They're the ones that actually wrote the book on summer melt, and they did a research study of this project so that we could see the impact. And the qualitative part of the study revealed some really interesting things. For instance, we found that the students preferred using the chatbot in many cases to speaking to a human being, but not for the reasons we suspected. We know 17-year-olds love to chat and text, and they do it with their friends and so forth, prefer that to calling their friends. But what we didn't realize is there were other barriers there to picking up the phone and letting somebody know about these problems. In many cases, the students said they preferred the impersonal nature of the chatbot because they were embarrassed by not knowing the right answer and not knowing the circumstances. Again, somebody who hasn't seen their biological dad in the last 3 years doesn't necessarily want to tell that story to some stranger. This is an actual exchange with one of our young women coming in. Her parents were going through a divorce, and she needed to know which parent should complete the FAFSA form and so forth, and got that answer on the chatbot. We also heard from some students that they found it empowering, that if they reached out to call somebody, it was as if somebody was doing it for them. But when they went on the phone and just got the information via the chatbot, they were coming up with the solution in and of themselves. So we launched these few changes and this new technology, and that brings us back to Austin. Austin was on track, ready to go, seemingly doing everything right despite all odds. And then he got his bill from Georgia State. And it was thousands of dollars more than what he had expected and what his family had budgeted. It turned out that on some form that had been submitted, he had transposed 2 digits in his Social Security number. And that meant that this great scholarship, state scholarship, the Zell Miller Scholarship that he had earned, hadn't been assigned to him and wasn't showing up on his bill. And so he started a conversation with Pounce. Pounce is our mascot, and Pounce is now the name of our chatbot. That actually 27 different exchanges between Austin and this platform over a couple-week period, trying to figure out what was going on, where the scholarship was, and how he could resolve it. And after those exchanges, he found a pathway forward. He actually came down to campus with his mother to get this all solved. He tells the story that his mother was so relieved when they went into that financial aid office and signed the forms that they went directly across the hall to the cashier's office, paid the bill on the spot, and he said his mother was crying. with relief and happiness that her son was set to go. You know, this is my favorite moment from the Bill Gates visit, where Austin, we had actually show Bill Gates how to use the new chatbot. He sat down, and the first thing he says is, "I have to say, sir, it's very humbling to be teaching software to you." And yeah. And Bill Gates was fascinated by it. You know, he spent 15 minutes asking different questions and seeing the questions that emerge. So these were a couple relatively subtle and actually quite low-cost changes between what we did summer of 15 and what we did summer of 16. Did they make a difference? In 1 year, we lowered our summer melt rate by 22%. That's over 300 additional students, mostly low income, mostly students of color, mostly first-generation students, who a year before would have been sitting out the college experience, who were in their seats, in their classes for the first day of class at Georgia State in the fall of 2016. 300 plus students. And one of those students was very likely Austin Burchell. You know, that's the power we have in our hands. And it doesn't always take, you know, dramatic restructurings of the university and hiring of dozens of new staff and so forth. Sometimes it's simple changes where we put the mirror on ourselves, recognize that we are part of the problem. It is our bureaucracies, it is our rules, it is our regulations that trip up so many students and trip up more first-generation low-income students than others. But the power that we have is that because they're problems of our own making, we have the ability to remove them. And more than that, we have the responsibility to remove them. I mean, which one of us sitting here today is willing to say that I have the ability to lower summer melt by 22%, but I'm going to sit on the sidelines and do nothing? And which one of us is willing to say to Austin Burchell that I'm willing, you know, to have a picture like that selfie that the students took with Bill Gates, but with Austin not in the picture? That could have well been the case just 12 months earlier. So, you know, it's a great power, it's a great honor that we have. It's also a lot of responsibility, and that's what keeps us working day after day to produce better results. Thank you very much.